Okay. Welcome everyone to our virtual meeting space. As you enter into the room, please take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat with your name and the location where you're joining from. We also have a guide for you to be able to share the native lands that you're living in currently as well, and anything else you'd like to share as you enter into the room. My name is Missouri. I'm the Development and Database Manager with Women's Foundation California, and you have joined one of our ongoing sessions in our financial education series. This one is called Credit and Debt 101. This session has been created to introduce all of the basic information that you need to know when it comes to credit and debt, what goes into credit reports, how to review that information, as well as a lot of the kind of intricacies that go into dealing with your personal credit and your debt as well. Today, we are led by Rita Zhang, who has joined us at previous sessions, and we're very, very blessed and happy that Rita is joining us again to share her expertise in this subject. She has over 14 years of experience in social justice, combined with her financial experience, and she is a certified financial fitness coach. So we are in really, really great hands to learn all of the information that we have planned for us today. So again, just one more reminder as you enter the room to please introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your pronouns, the location where you're joining us from, anything else you'd like to share. And without any further ado, I will turn it over to Rita. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. And I just want to first express my gratitude to Missouri, Nina, and Jay and Women's Foundation for having me at tonight's workshop. It's my second time, and I had a really great time with this community a couple weeks ago, so I'm really happy to be back. I'm Rita Zhang. I use she, her pronouns, and I am calling you all tonight from the indigenous territories of the Ohlone people, specifically on Chochenyo Ohlone land. And I'm very happy to share space with you all. So you all are here for a 90-minute end of day financial education workshop on credit and debt 101. So first of all, kudos to you all for coming. There's so many places and ways you could be spending your time. So thank you for coming here tonight to gather in community and to work on your financial education. And we really want to make this space interesting and meaningful for you. So please engage with us in the chat box. Nina will be helping flag any questions I missed in there. Missouri already gave a great intro, so I'm gonna skip this part and get right into, first of all, grounding. So I just wanna take a very short couple of minutes to ground ourselves into this space this evening. Whenever I think about my own credit and my own debt, for me, it could feel both anxiety producing to be like, okay, do I know everything I need to know? Especially as someone that didn't grow up with a lot of financial education or access to even resources to learn this stuff. And also it's like kind of heavy because first I had student loans earlier in my life. Thankfully I've paid those off, but now I also have mortgage, which is also a big, big sum of debt. So even if you all don't feel the way I do about this, I think it's nice just to ground into our space. You're probably coming in from a long day of whatever you were doing, and there's so many things going on in the world. So just take this as a couple minutes to center. So I invite you now, if you would like, to either drop your gaze or close your eyes and just get into a comfortable seated position. If you want, you can even lay down or whatever just feels good for your body. And then I invite you to take a deep breath in and release. And one more deep breath in And release. And just be here for 2 minutes. I'll mind the time for you, and you have nothing to do but just to breathe, and I'll call you back at the end of 2 minutes. Take a couple more last deep breaths. And whenever you're ready, you can raise your gaze or open your eyes and rejoin us in this space. So taking time for ourselves is, in my opinion, super crucial to navigating our money, and especially for something like credit and debt, which we all experience in different parts of our lives. On the slide that I have up right now, I have an image that I pulled from a beautiful artist on Instagram that I also have linked on the slide. And this image says, "Let us move toward love for self, for others, for our neighborhoods and cities." And I want to ground us with this as our starting premise. And you might be wondering, why is Rita talking about this? I thought I was at a Credit and Debt 101 workshop. And actually, I think this is what we're all working towards, right? In a world where we are in a very capitalistic system, when many of us do not have everything that we need to survive, inevitably we may either accumulate debt at different points in our lives or have to navigate this credit system. But I just want to remind us that ultimately what we're working towards is to create a more loving world for ourselves and each other, and to create greater interdependence so that we don't have to be bogged down by things like credit and debt when we could just have access to all that we need together. So even though this one workshop alone won't dismantle all of these systems, hopefully through at least some education, you could find a little bit more information to help you along your journey wherever you may be at. So for our agenda, what I'm going to do is I kind of split up our time into 3 kind of main parts of credit and debt. So first, we'll start with credit scores and credit reports, which is intentionally made to be very complicated as an industry. So hopefully we can break that down into more bite-sized pieces of information for you. Then we'll move into some debt repayment strategies that you could consider and try on for yourself if you do have debt. And then lastly, we will talk a little bit about debt to income ratios and how that is used if you're thinking about buying a home for yourself. And we already had a home buying workshop and we have another one coming up. So that last part is meant to sink in to my coworker Teresa's workshop too. And then we'll wrap up. So I do want to let you all know that there might feel like there's a lot of information in these slides, and I want you to just soak in what you're able to and let the rest go. We're going to send out these slides to you afterwards, so you can always look at the information again afterwards. You can also email us with any follow-up questions and just take it a little bit at a time. So again, a reminder, it's really helpful. I've already seen some folks engage in the chat. Thank you. It's really helpful if you give us, engage with us in the chat or even in emojis. In the age of Zoom days, I think it's helpful just to know a little bit of what's going on for you behind your screen. And today is meant to be financial education and not necessarily financial advice because everyone's circumstances are different. So I just want to remind you of that. I just saw a question from Venus. The artist is Beautiful Chorus, and I do have that song linked in the end of our slide deck. Ooh, and maybe there's an original song that, cool, thanks Ashanti. Yeah, people might not know more than me. I found this group just through like they have a lot of really great mantra songs that help me meditate and just like be still. Okay, so let's get started with the first part of credit scores and credit reports. This is something that a lot of people ask me in my workshops and as a financial coach. So first of all, I think we commonly hear people talk about credit scores and wanting to know what our credit scores are and wondering how they may or may not impact us. So I want to start with just, first of all, where do credit scores come from? And what is a credit scoring model? So we actually all have different credit scores out there because there's different models that give us different scores. And most commonly, we may hear the term FICO or a FICO score, which is one type of credit score from that specific credit scoring model. You may have also heard of something called the Vantage score. That's just another scoring model. And honestly, there's probably a bunch more out there that I didn't even list on the slide today. What is usually most common, though, that people use and lenders use, or even when you check your own credit score, is the FICO score model. So that's what the rest of the information following this slide will be focused on, since FICO score is used most commonly. But I wanted to include this because sometimes I've had coaches come to me and they'll tell me, well, I saw my credit score is XYZ, but then I went and applied for a car loan and they told me my score is this other score and it's not the same. And that might be why, because there are different scoring models. So what you see might be a different model compared to the one that your lender was using. But you could also always ask them, if you did officially apply for credit, for them to give you a copy of what they saw. And they should do that, especially if they denied you a loan, you're entitled to that. But just a little tidbit, because sometimes people have asked me that question. So in terms of a credit score, what actually makes up a credit score? So these are the 5 main components that go into this formula that's actually secret information or proprietary information that these credit scoring models don't share with us. I'm going to keep my commentary about that as an aside, but what we need to know is like exactly how they calculate it. They intentionally keep from us as consumers, but we do know that broadly it's these 5 main components that they use, and these are the 5 main things that you could try to work on if you are trying to raise your credit score or even just understand why your score may be what it is. So the biggest factor in this pie chart is your payment history. Then comes credit usage, followed by the age of your credit or how long your credit history is. And then credit mix and new credit, which the last two are a little bit smaller. So they have a slightly less impact, but they do affect your credit score. So I'm going to explain each of those in depth now. So first, that biggest factor that affects your credit score is your payment history. So what that means is, are you making on-time payments? If you have credit card bills, student loans, a car note, if you're making those payments on time and paying at least the minimum balance, that really actively helps your credit score be higher or raise your credit score, as long as you're making the minimum payment. So a lot of times when folks come to me and they're working on their credit, that's usually one of the first questions I ask them, like, how are you doing in making your payments, and coming up with a plan to at least meet the minimum payment if they have a balance on it. Next is your credit usage. So what that means is, how much of your total credit limit are you using? Generally, it's recommended that you use about 30% of your credit limit or below to help your credit score. So I'm going to explain this a little bit more because it could get confusing. So first of all, the credit limit is across all of your limits. It's not just for one card, it's across total what you have. So for example, if you have two credit cards and your credit card one has a $10,000 credit limit and your credit card two has a $5,000 credit limit, then your total credit limit is $15,000. So it looks at that cumulatively, and then if you want to keep it at that 30% rate, 30% of 15,000 is 4,500. So if between those two cards in total, you have a $4,500 balance or less, that is keeping it below that 30% usage rate. Or you could just have 4,500 on one card and zero on the other. Whatever way you slice and dice it, it looks at it together. So that's what you really want to consider. And if you're able, having it even less than 30% usage rate could also be really helpful. I see your question, Alicia. We're going to get to questions in just a few minutes after I get through some of this content. So hold on to that, please. Okay, so then age of credit. So the next thing is the age of your credit. So sometimes you all may have heard advice out there in the finance industry saying, don't close your oldest credit card. So this is the reason why sometimes that advice is floated out there. People with longer credit histories help. The longer history you have, the more then these credit scoring models have to work with in terms of data to really evaluate your trustworthiness or your credit. So generally, your older credit can help with your credit score. So for me, for example, my first credit card was a Macy's credit card that I opened as a teenager because I loved Macy's at that time. And that became my oldest credit card. And after not using it for many years, they just automatically closed it because it was inactive. And I saw a little ding in my credit score. And I won't ever know for sure, but that was what I was guessing, that was the reason why when they closed my oldest credit card, then my credit history shrunk to then my next oldest credit card. So that doesn't necessarily mean you should, like, if you really wanted to close a credit card that was really old from your teenager years, that doesn't mean like never do it, but it's just helpful for you to know that that might impact your credit score for a little bit. Okay, then we have credit mix. And what that means is, what types of credits do you have? So generally, the more variety of credit you have, the more different types of debt you have can then help these credit scoring models look at you as saying, okay, this person is paying their credit cards on time. They're also paying their car note on time. So you're showing them in different parts of your life that you're like paying and you're trustworthy. And so that can also help your credit score go up a little bit or increase your credit score. And sometimes people tell me that, oh, after they finish paying off something like a car note, for example, they saw their credit score go down, which kind of feels counterintuitive, but that could be one of the reasons why sometimes you see your credit score fluctuate if you finish paying off something that you've had for a long time, but then it reduced your credit mix. I'm seeing the Macy's comments. Okay, cool. And so the varieties are typically credit cards, car loans, student loans, and mortgage are kind of the most common different types of credits. Okay, so then the last one is new credit inquiries. So have you recently applied for new credit? So if you did, that's considered a hard inquiry. And I'm sorry that there's all these like jargony things that the finance industry uses. A hard inquiry is just a really jargony way to say you applied for a loan of some sort or credit of some sort, right? It's when you officially submit an application to either open a credit card or take out a car loan or take out a student loan. And that is considered a hard inquiry in the financial industry. And it does lower your credit score a little bit. If you're really needing that loan, of course, you should go for it. But if you apply for a bunch of new credit at a time, that's when it really hits your credit score and lowers it, because what the credit scoring models are thinking is, why is this person like trying to get all this money all of a sudden and like borrowing so much? Like, are they going to be able to pay this back? Are they in like a funky situation? So that's why it does lower it a little bit. And you want to be mindful if you do need to apply for a credit or you want to open a new credit card because there's like a better deal in this X bank or whatever, go for it. But just know that you probably want to space it out, or at least know that it might affect your credit score, especially if you're trying to apply for a big loan later. You might want to be thoughtful about like the timing of when you apply for things and when you open new accounts. So a very common misconception that I hear still to this day is that checking your credit score or your credit report hurts your credit score. And that's actually not true. So there are also what they call soft inquiries. So pretty much these are just things that are educational or informative, right? You're looking at your own credit score because you're trying to see how you're doing. You're checking your credit report because that's suggested anyways that we all regularly check our credit report. Those things are not you applying to borrow money. Those are just you being you wanting to know about your own information. That does not hurt your credit. So we encourage you all to do that. Other times, other companies may look at your information too. So I think probably almost all of us get solicited for like credit cards and like different loans to take out. So anytime banks are doing that, they're doing soft inquiries on your credit history. So if you pull up your credit report, you might see like them listed and you're like, I've never talked to these people. Why are they showing up on my credit report? It's probably because they were doing soft inquiries and seeing if they wanted to lend to you and like send you those marketing things. And those things don't hurt your credit score at all. So you don't need to worry about those sorts of things. Okay, let me just pause here about credit score. So what questions do we have? I saw Alicia's hand raised first. So either you could unmute or type it in the chat.
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, can we go with Alicia first and then we'll go to Asia?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, I had a quick question. When you were talking about, I forget what the slide was, but I was listening to a podcast today and was talking about the difference between paying your credit card bill on the due date and paying your bill on the statement date. Do you have any additional information about that and what you recommend, like which one is better than the other?
Yeah, that honestly confuses me all the time too. I'm like, oh my gosh, am I late or am I not? As long as you pay by the due date, you're good. There's nothing, at least that I know of, that's particularly beneficial to pay at the statement date. The statement date is just when they send it to you. And then usually they give you a period of time between that and the due date to pay it off. So as long as you're paying the minimum balance, you're set. You just want to watch for overdue payments. You don't want to pay late. Okay. And then Asia.
Sorry. Okay. Yes, I'm concerned because my credit is considered good. Like places like what do you call it? That oh Lord, that common one that you get free, that has me like in the 800 almost. I mean, it's just crazy. And then it's never even close to that in Experian, Equifax, and Union. What I'm concerned with it is with Equifax and TransUnion, it's always good, but with what is their name? The other one, Experian, I'm about to take them to court because they've done so many things like dumped me 60 points, 70 points, and I've never done nothing because I've never been late on anything, just never. And I had a bankruptcy maybe about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something. I was ignorant at that time, didn't even really need to do the bankruptcy. I was worried about some stuff, but the years have passed, and that seems not to be doing a heavy thing, even though I know it's going to be there for years. But I keep getting them dumping me like 60 points, and sometimes they're giving me the 60 points back, and I will not have done much at all, and they don't tell me anything when I call in. They ruined me getting something I was going after because they had dumped me at that moment, even though a week or so later they pumped me back up. What is that?
So Asia, the different things you're talking about is actually in this next part I'm talking about in credit reports. So it sounds like to me what might be happening is these different credit bureaus, which are the Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, they're all credit bureaus. So they hold your credit reports. It sounds like to me that they may have different information. I'll talk more about that in a second, but I would recommend calling them, or first of all, checking your credit report at each of those and comparing it, because they may have different information. And then if there's wrong information, for you to dispute that. And there's ways that you can do that literally online on the website, or you could call them to dispute it, or you could write them a letter. There's multiple different ways you could do it, so that they get the information right. And then checking for any misinformation, because if your things are fluctuating and you're saying and experiencing that you're not actually changing that much in your lifestyle, why is it fluctuating so much? Making sure that the information's correct. So that's where I would start.
Okay, just because calling them is nothing. They just give me nothing. But you're saying write a dispute letter or something and I put it in my file? Okay, yes. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just trying to skim. I'm going to keep moving to credit reports since we just started talking about that. But Nina, if you can help me, or Missouri J, just kind of collect the questions that have been coming in the Zoom chat, that would be really helpful. Okay, so Asia just helped us really nicely segue into credit reports. So credit score is that 3-digit number that you have, and there's usually a scale. The credit report is complementary to your score. The score is just a number, but the report is actually a very detailed, long document that, or long if you have a longer credit history. Sometimes I work with people like new immigrants or younger folks who don't have as long of a report because they just started their credit history. But it's a document, and it shows everything about your history in terms of credit in the US. And it could include things like, how many credit cards have you opened? Where were they at? When did you close them? How many loans have you taken out? How much debt do you have out? How on time were those payments? Are any of those debts in default or in collections? And anytime you applied for credit, so those credit inquiries, whether it's hard inquiry or a soft inquiry, like just checking on your score, all of that is detailed in your credit report. So as I mentioned, there are 3 major credit bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Even though lenders should report their stuff to each 3 of these credit bureaus, they don't always do that. And that's why sometimes your reports look different, even though you're still the same person. So I do recommend checking across all 3 of these bureaus. I have an image, a screenshot here of a sample of what an Experian credit report can look like. So it has like the person's name and the different ways that someone's name have been legally documented, different addresses they've lived at, social security numbers linked to them, etc. But all 3 of your reports should have the same information. It just might be formatted differently, but the information should be the same. So you can look at a sample credit report here if you've never seen one. But better yet, what you could do is look at your actual own credit report. Okay, so this was true prior to COVID. Everyone is entitled to 1 free credit report from each bureau at least once a year. However, because of COVID, they've totally changed those rules for about 2 years now. And now every consumer in the US can get a free credit report from each bureau once a week. So that's like a lot. Like you could really regularly check in and see how your information is doing. And there are places, like I saw someone put in the chat, like Credit Karma, that offers your credit report. And these are like third-party people that just pull it for convenience for you. What I recommend is using the official annual credit report website. And this is the only official one that holds your reports. And it's free there. And the reason why I recommend this over other third-party sites is sometimes third-party sites may be selling your information. That's why they're giving it to you for free. Or it's just, we don't always know what they're doing with that. So utilizing annual credit report, and this is the website image here, is usually what I recommend folks start with if you want to check your credit report. And I do recommend that you check it regularly. As I was sharing about Asia, who was just sharing, to make sure you catch any misinformation, because there might be wrong things on there that's dinging your credit score that's not even right. It's also a really good way to prevent identity theft, which is actually sadly something that's happening a lot now in the age of technology. It's really hard to keep our information protected. And so when you check your credit report, sometimes you might see like things open and you're like, that's not me. It could be a first clue to that your identity might be stolen and people might be opening accounts in your name that you didn't know about. And so that's also another reason to check your credit report and just make sure that your like digital security is up to par. How do you correct wrong? So yeah, it's super simple. So when you look at your report, usually all of these credit bureaus or websites have very prominent places to dispute wrong information. You can submit online things, you can call them. Similar to what someone just shared here, I've had other coaches that's been trying to call to correct information, and everything is just kind of upside down right now in the world. But recently, my coaches have not had a lot of success calling. So you might want to try the website methods or like mailing them. They are required to respond to you within a certain amount of time. I can't remember the exact days right now, so I don't want to give you the wrong information, but they are legally required to respond to your disputes. So start with their website and send in some disputes there, and then maybe you could try calling and trying your luck there. But I have heard recently that calling, the phone lines are all like either slow or jammed. So no, checking your credit report is considered a soft inquiry. So it does not hurt your credit score because you're just learning about information about your credit. You're not applying for money or you're not applying for a loan. So it's a soft inquiry and it's okay for you to check it every week. Okay, so I'm gonna just do a little poll to see how we're doing in terms of understanding. So I think Nina is gonna help me out to turn on a poll right now.
All right, so I just launched the poll. Y'all should see it pop up. In case you don't see it pop up, at the bottom of your screen, sort of on that toolbar, there is a picture of a graph that says polls. Click that if the poll didn't automatically launch for you.
So the questions that we have up is true or false. The biggest factor that affects my credit score is my payment history. And the second question is true or false. Credit bureaus will notify me if my identity has been stolen.
I see folks are still answering, so I'll give it a few more seconds. Okay. I'll go ahead and share the results.
Okay, awesome. So it looks like most folks answered true for the first question. The biggest factor that affects my credit score is payment history. And the correct answer is true. So on-time payment history really, really affects your credit score, whether it could help your credit score or it could hurt your credit score. So one of the first things you could try to do if you're not doing that is just make that minimum balance. Even making the minimum balance can really count as an on-time payment. So that can really help your credit score. The next question is credit bureaus will notify me if my identity has been stolen. And most of you said false, and that is the correct answer. It's false. So I kind of tried to make a little bit of a trick question, but I guess it was not that tricky because y'all got it. So checking your credit report through the credit bureaus can help you see if there's funky things happening where maybe someone stole your identity, but the credit bureaus themselves will not hit you up and be like, hey, we think your identity is stolen. If only they were that nice, right? But it's up to you as a consumer to really be vigilant in making sure that your information's safe and that everything is correct. So good job, y'all. Okay. So are there, just from the Women's Foundation team, are there questions I haven't gotten to in the chat? Could you all read those or flag those for me?
Yeah. Let's see. They're going back to checking the credit score. Someone asked, is this how I can find all my debt too? Does this include healthcare debt?
Yeah. So your credit report is where you could find out what debt you have that's reported to the bureaus, and medical debt can be reported to your report as well. So it kind of depends on if the lender reported it to the bureau. Usually they do though. So you can see that if you have medical debt that you owe, that it's on your credit report.
All right, and I have one more. With regards to hard credit, even when you are approved, your credit ends up being lowered initially, but how long does it take for it to come back up when the credit line hits your report? For example, I applied for a credit card and got approved for $1,500. Is it one cycle or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it depends. It depends on how many credit cards you applied to before like you chose the one that you went through with. And again, the credit scoring models, they keep this information proprietary, AKA secret from us. So it's really hard to give you a definitive answer, but roughly it could be about a few months. But if you're continuing to do all the other things like on-time payments, keeping your credit usage low, etc., you may see it come back up after a couple months, but there's no exact answer to that usually.
Okay, if there's time, I see I think two questions in the chat. If mortgage credit was different than credit card credit.
Yes.
We were trying to refinance our home last year and the finance person said she couldn't check our credit too often, so we had to wait a few months. She also told us that our mortgage credit was different than our credit card credit. I hadn't heard either of these prior.
Yeah, so I think probably what that mortgage person is talking to about is they use different credit scoring models. And lenders, like specifically mortgage lenders, have different scoring models that they may be looking at too that could be different from FICO. So that's probably what they were referring to. And then also keep in mind for something big like a mortgage, they are checking your credit score and they're likely checking a bunch of other things too, like how much money you have in your bank, your assets, your employment status, pay stubs, all of those things. So credit score is a big part of mortgage lending. It's not the only thing. And we'll talk a little bit more, a tiny bit about that later too in our workshop. So they're likely using a different scoring model.
Okay, and then how long should we space out before applying to a new credit, loan, etc.?
Yeah, I've seen different things out there and there's not even one definitive thing that I look at. Roughly though, for credit cards, I do think it's maybe about once every couple of years I've seen that and personally have found that true too, but there might be different recommendations as well. So I don't want to just tell you like this is the truth, because also it's your life and your circumstances. Sometimes it's, even though these may be guidelines, you might need to apply for something sooner, or maybe you could wait longer. But you could kind of roughly use that as a guideline.
All right, thank you, Rita. I think that's all the questions for now, but keep them coming, y'all.
Okay, I think I just saw Angela's last question. What is an ideal credit score? It kind of depends on what you're working towards. I've hear lenders sometimes, and I'm not a lender myself, right? So I'm a financial coach. So sometimes I hear lenders say, as long as you have a good score or above, then they'll still offer you the best interest rates. It could vary by lenders. So a good in FICO score, for example, is 740 or above. What I will say though, it's usually a little bit more complex than that, because are you applying for a loan or something with someone else? Also, what are different factors in your financial life that could help or maybe harm your potential to get a loan? So I know like a lot of times we're fixated on getting the credit score right, but also know that sometimes it's there's other ways that you can achieve your goal. And maybe it means a slight, even for a loan, maybe it means a slightly lower or higher interest rate, but maybe that's still worthwhile to you. So ideal sometimes can even be subjective. So I would say really consider the entirety of your situation and what is it exactly is your goal and what's your timeline for that goal. Okay, I'm going to take this last question and then we're going to move on. Toya asks, how does receiving an automatic credit increase affect your credit? Okay, do you mean like, I think you mean credit limit. Yes, I'm guessing that's what you mean. Yep, thumbs up, thank you. So that actually could be helpful. Actually, that's a tip if you're trying to raise your credit score, to see if you can get your credit limits raised, because how that can help is if you think back to credit usage, the higher your credit limit, the more space it gives you to before you hit that 30% recommended mark. So it could make you look like you're using your credit even at a lower percentage. So that could help. Conversely, I've also worked with coaches that don't want their credit limit raised because maybe working on spending is one of their things that they're focused on. And sometimes psychologically, seeing a bigger credit limit does something different. So it does vary by person. But if you're able to to maintain that credit usage at 30% or below, an increase in that credit limit could actually help your credit score.
When the credit card company automatically gave me a credit increase, did they do another inquiry, or how did that?
I don't know. I think generally they see if you're making on-time payments and they just want you to keep using their card, their services. They just do that. Or even after a certain period of time, like maybe you open a credit card and after a year, they're like, cool, you're still doing good. They'll just bump up your limits, but it's, I think, pretty dependent on the bank and then whatever they do behind the scenes in the banks.
Okay, so they're not really running my credit all over again, right?
I don't know exactly, but even if they did, it would be considered a soft inquiry, so it wouldn't hurt your credit score if they were doing that. Okay. So let's move to debt repayment strategies. Thank you for all of these great questions. So if you want to share, just from emojis, how many of us have some sort of debt right now? You could just give us a thumbs up. Seeing many thumbs and even a silly face. Yep, many of us have debt, and we all have different relationships with debt, right? Some of us might feel very comfortable with debt and it's okay. Some of us might hate debt and really wish we didn't have it. I'm also on the let's cancel debt train because we should have all of our basic needs met: education, food, housing, healthcare, right? So yeah. If you do have debt, and while we are organizing for the systemic change, right, as the populist people, here are some methods you could consider and try on in tandem. And again, I don't think these things necessarily change the systems, but sometimes the information can help in the present moment and help us avoid getting more stuck into situations we don't want to be stuck in. So very common are these things that we hear spoken in tandem about: the snowball and avalanche methods. So these are pretty common and popular debt repayment strategies that's offered, and I want to explain that a little bit more to you all for you to consider. So first is the avalanche method. So if you imagine a snowy mountaintop and there's a ton of snow at the top, the avalanche method would say, start at the top with your highest interest debt. So write down all of your debt, all the things you owe, and then write down a column of the interest rates for each of those debts. So whatever is the highest interest rate, the avalanche method suggests that we start with the highest interest rate debt and pay as much as you can into that highest interest rate debt. All of those other debts that you have, just pay the minimum, right? We're really focusing on the highest interest rates ones first. And this method will help you save the most money on interest, right? Because the interest is always accumulating and that becomes more money we owe. So if you're really about trying to save money and you don't like paying more than you have to, the avalanche method may be good for you. You just start with the highest interest, and then after you knock that one out, then move on to the next highest interest and pay as much as you can into that next debt and the minimum on the rest, and then knock that one out and go sequentially in that way. And then you avalanche down the mountain and saving your lowest interest rates debts for last. Conversely, there's also the snowball method. So this one is a little bit different. So in this method, what you want to do is write down all of your debts on one column, and then write down the balance or how much you owe for each of those debts on the next column. What you do for the snowball method is now you pick the lowest balance, the smallest amount you owe. Maybe it's like a credit card bill for like $500. balance, right? And you start with your lowest balance one, pay aggressively into that one, and pay the minimum on all of your other debts. And with this method, what happens is the benefit is you have some quick satisfaction because you get to knock out those tiny things fast. I would also add that it maybe can make it more manageable. It's more convenient to have just less things to like manage and less like sprawling little accounts to look at. And it can be really motivating to knock out a small debt. And then you're like, cool, now let's knock out the next higher balance and then knock out the next higher balance. And sometimes when I coach people, the motivation matters more than the actual money that they're accumulating in interest, because getting that momentum can feel really great to start knocking these things out. So this is another method for you to consider if you think this might be more of your style and what would be helpful for you. Then we also have the Powerpay method. So the Powerpay method can actually be used and layered on top of either the Snowball or the Avalanche method. So what the Powerpay method says is, first of all, when you're budgeting, so if you came to my first workshop about budgeting, cool, this links to that. And if not, ask for the recording because we recorded it. So in your budget, you're allocating money for all of your debt payments. So what the Powerpay method says is, once you pay off one debt, whether it's through Snowball or Avalanche, don't just reallocate that line item to now being like, cool, now I have extra cash flow to pay for lifestyle expenses or other things. Instead, you reallocate what you were paying for that debt to another debt. So you're actually not changing your lifestyle and your budget. It's still going towards overall your debt repayments, but it helps you aggressively pay things down faster versus, okay, I paid off this credit card. Now I can use that additional $60 a month for something else. No, put it back into your debt. And this method really helps people who want to pay off debt really fast do that. So what's neat about Powerpay is that they also have a free website with a lot of tools, worksheets, calculators, free for you to use, for you to type out all of your debts, and you can bid and calculators that tell you how long it'll take to pay it off with the Powerpay method, what the difference would be if you tweak some numbers. So it's a really great resource if you want to check it out. It's linked here. I'm going to get through these next part of Know Your Rights with collections, and then we'll stop for questions. So included in debt repayment is, I think this is really important, right? We have to know our rights as consumers. Even if we owe money, that doesn't mean we don't have any rights anymore, right? And because oftentimes if we do owe money, we might be in a vulnerable position. What's unfortunate is that these collectors take advantage of that. So I really wanted to make sure that we also touched on this, right? So whether or not you've ever dealt with a collection agency, this is just really important information to have and to share with those around you. So first of all, if a debt collector calls you and you weren't expecting it, or it's just kind of out of the blue, or they're bringing up something that you owe that you're like, huh? Like maybe it's from a long time ago or whatever the case is, it's always a choice of yours to tell them, send me this in writing first. Like you don't have to actually talk to them on the phone just because you picked up, right? You can always demand that they send you whatever they need to tell you in writing first. And it's also your right to not give any of your personal information. You don't have to give them any of your financial information, like how much money you have or anything like that, until you confirm that they're legitimate. Because unfortunately, what's also happening is they just might be a jerk kind of collection person, but there's also lots of scams out there, right? So we want to avoid both of being harassed and being scammed. So know that you don't have to respond right away. And there's so many things I could tell you about, but we don't have time for like all of those details. So I just wanted to plug Consumer Finance Protection Bureau has a really extensive library of resources for us as consumers to protect our rights. That's linked here. And one thing I wanted to highlight is they even have sample response letters that are written for you as templates already. So if you've never dealt with collections before, or maybe you have, it could be a very overwhelming experience. And sometimes we don't know what to say back to them. Consumer Finance Protection Bureau made it really easy. They have all these sample templates for you to just copy and paste, including like stop calling me or like send me XYZ information, whatever. Like there's different ones that you can check out to just copy and paste and use for your situation. Okay. Also, I just want to talk about what harassment includes, right? So that you know if you're being harassed. First, there's the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So this protects us as consumers, right, from being harassed. And harassment can include repeated phone calls from a collector. Anytime that they're using obscene or profane language, they can't do that. That's just not cool. Any threats of violence or harm, or even publishing your information or telling your family or friends or your employer about your debt, they are absolutely not allowed to do that. And they also can't call you without telling you who they are. Like they're supposed to give you, I'm calling about this, I'm calling from this company or agency, and they have to give you those information, right? They can't just bully you. Also, just in last November, a new debt collection rule was passed between the Consumer Finance Bureau and the government. So there's more laws now that are protecting us, and it goes into even more details. I won't read each of these bullet points, but I just really wanted to impress upon you, like, we have rights, right? Even if we are in a tough situation with debt and we default it, that doesn't mean we are not worthy of our rights, and know that nobody should be harassing you for any debt. So this new law even covers like how can they engage with you on social media, or can't engage with you. So check this out on your own time if this is useful information for you or a loved one. And again, all of this is linked here. If you or a loved one is being harassed by a debt collector, you can submit a complaint to CFPB. They're actually really, I've done trainings with these folks. They really mean well, and they will respond to help give you information or help advocate for you. And also you can get in touch with your state attorney general's office about any suspicious callers. And then here's another nonprofit that I'm a fan of. They are free or subsidized services for people in California. They're called Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. So they have free or subsidized legal support for you in your financial situation. And legal support sometimes is hard to come by. So this is a great nonprofit. I recommend you check them out if you feel like you need some legal support regarding any sort of debt that you may be experiencing. They're also multilingual. So if you or a loved one doesn't speak English, they have multilingual staff. And if they don't have staff that speak your language, they have translators and interpreters available. All right, so we're gonna do a poll and then we'll take questions. So here's our next poll. Okay, thanks, Nina.
Yeah.
So you should see the poll up now. The first question is, true or false, the avalanche method will help me save the most money on interest costs. And question 2 is, creditors are allowed to keep calling me as long as I still have debt I owe.
Great, I see folks are answering, so I'm just going to give it a few more seconds.
I don't see the poll.
If you don't see the poll, there should be, and you're on your computer, there should be a toolbar at the bottom that says polls. The image is a sort of graph, 3 lines. Click that. Let's see if the poll pops up that way. And then In case it doesn't, I'm so sorry, but we'll also talk about the results shortly as well. I'm gonna launch the results. And there you are.
Thanks, Nina. Okay, so for the first question, it looks like most of us answered true, and that is the correct answer. So the avalanche method, to remind you, just think of the mountain. What's the highest interest rates at the top? And you start by paying the highest interest rate that you have, and then you go down the line to the lower interest rates. So that method is true. It does save you the most money in terms of interest costs, if that's important for you. And then our next question is, creditors are allowed to keep calling me as long as I still have debt. So the majority of you all answered false, and that was the answer I was going for. Though reading back to it, I guess I could have provided more detail. But they can't call you like a bajillion times if you have debt, right? There are criterias that they can't call you repeated times, or if they've spoken to you once in a week already, they can't call you back for another 7 days. They can't call you at weird hours, like in the middle of the night. And even like family or even the workplace, if you tell them you cannot call me at my workplace, they can't do that. So that's all considered harassment. So even if you still owe debt, even if you haven't worked it out yet, there are parameters for which collectors have to follow so that they're not harassing you. But in terms of longevity, they could, yes, if they're following those parameters, and maybe they're just calling you once a month. So that's maybe where I could have provided more details. I'm responding to a chat. Yes, they could keep calling you as long as they follow these parameters that are not harassing you. So I'll tweak this poll question for next time. And then sometimes these collectors sell. So what collectors do is they try to collect on the money that they have owed, and they get all of these like outdue debts, right? And sometimes they sell it to a new collecting agency. And so maybe after a while you stop hearing from someone, and then all of a sudden you start hearing from a new collector. Sometimes that's also what may be happening. If you have really old debt that people are just selling your debts to other collection agencies for. Okay, so let's get to questions. So Asia, I've seen your hand up for a while. Let's start with you. And then if you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and unmute or put them in the chat.
I guess what I'm really interested in, is there a legal right that a person has when you feel that the credit bureaus aren't doing their job, aren't collecting the data properly? Is there lawsuit capability for that, or are they immune from that?
So this would actually be a really great question for you to ask the lawyers at HERA, because my expertise in the legality would not be as strong as the attorneys.
All right, can you give me their information again, please?
Yes. So this is Financial Legal Help, Housing and Economics Rights Advocates. It's linked here, but I believe it's heraca.org. I think maybe if Nina, you can help me Google them real quick, we can drop the link in the chat. So first I would definitely say hit up those attorneys because they're actually attorneys versus me, I'm a financial coach. What I do know though is that the bureaus are required to report your information correctly and accurately. So if you're seeing that the information is wrong, for sure you can dispute that. What may also be happening though is the bureaus can only report what lenders send them. So you also have to kind of figure out, is it the lender or is it the bureau? That's also kind of why sometimes it's really difficult. But I would say, thank you, Nina. Nina just dropped the chat, the HERA's website into the chat. So I would really encourage you to reach out to the attorneys there. They're really great. Okay, next question, I see Toya.
Thank you. My question and my concern is, I had some old debt. I did contact the collection agencies. We had a good conversation. We set up payment arrangements. I know they said once I started the payment arrangement that they were going to remove it out of the negative part of the collection area. One hasn't, the other ones have. How can I get them to remove it, as I am almost done paying it with my payment plans? And you are correct. In order for me to catch this, they were selling my credit debt around to different agencies. So I finally caught it at the last one. So now they're being paid off.
Yeah. So first I would ask if you got that agreement in writing. Anytime, like if I'm dealing with a credit collection or a debt collection, people like want to get those things in writing. Do you have that in writing from them? Okay, cool. So I would just, I mean, I don't know that I have any better advice except to like have that proof in writing, show it to them and have them follow through on that. And if they still don't, then file a complaint about them at the CFPB website. It is really helpful if they can remove those negative marks from your credit report and hold them accountable to what they said. And that was very smart of you to get it in writing. So I would say follow up on that and then file a complaint if they don't follow through with that.
Thank you so much.
Okay, any other questions about debt repayment and your rights with collections?
Can
There
you
was a-
explain to, I'm sorry.
There was a question earlier in the chat. What's the balance that you suggest between paying off debt and saving?
Such an important question. First, there's no right answer. It kind of depends on what you're saving for and how much do you owe and what kind of debt it is. As much as possible, I think I do encourage folks to try to build up some sort of emergency savings, if that's what you're saving for, and then try to pay down the debt before other types of saving goals. But that's also not always the right answer for folks because maybe your saving goal is for something very important right now. That's even more important to you than paying off maybe a student loan that will take you a long time to pay off, right? So ultimately, it comes back to what I think is grounding, what's important for you, what feels like the priority for you in your life right now. And then are you okay with the trade-offs? If it's slower to pay off debt, or maybe you pay off debt faster, but you reach your savings goal a little later. Unless that savings goal is an emergency savings goal, try to get a little bit of at least a little bit of emergency savings, because oftentimes that can help you prevent yourself from getting into further debt if you have some emergency savings. Okay, any other questions?
I see Toya had her hand up, or Toya's hand up.
Okay, cool. Go for it, Toya.
Thank you. And sorry about that earlier, Nina. Can you elaborate on, I don't remember if you discussed it, you know how it's been said back in the days, you know, if you had a debt, leave it on there 7 years, after 7 years, take it off, and then it's possible they can put it back on. Can you touch on that topic?
Yeah, so anything you have in terms of default or collections or just information on your credit report expires after 7 years, unless it's a bankruptcy. So if it's a bankruptcy, it could stay on for 10 years on your credit report. So it kind of depends, right? Like if you're close to the 7-year mark, it depends on a couple of things, on like how far or long are you on that 7-year mark? What is your financial situation now? Know that if you pay off things in collections or in default, newer credit scoring models now have a way to help your credit score. Like it's less negative if it's at least a zero balance. But not all lenders use these new credit scoring models either. So that's also a trade-off. It depends on too, like, do you have the money to pay it off? Do you need to pay it off? It's also, what do you need the credit for? Are you trying to open like a credit card again? Or maybe you're trying to buy a home, but maybe you're not. Maybe those things aren't important for you right now. So it's really a weighing of all of these different factors to then decide what's right for you and what action you may want to take.
I had seen it while I'm paying it off now, you know, I had a stroke. So it was very hard for me to pay those debts off. So I saw it was on there for 7 years. And then soon as it went off, it came right back on.
Yeah, I think there's that's where I would also recommend, if you're in that situation, to reach out to the attorneys at HERA or Housing and Economic Rights Advocates, because something must have happened with, I believe it's a statute of limitations. So like when things get reactivated, it extends that period of time in which you may owe something, I believe. That might be what could have happened. So talking to the legal experts at HERA can maybe help you get better understanding.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to move into our last section, and then we'll have time for questions again at the very end. Okay, so this is just a tiny little teaser because it both relates to debt, but also home buying. The majority of the home buying information will be offered by my colleague Teresa at our next home buying workshop, so she'll go into it more in detail. But I wanted to cover this thing called debt to income ratio if you are in a position where you're trying to buy a home in the short or long term. So what is the debt to income ratio? So first, this ratio is this math equation of the total annual debt payments that you make, so the total amount that you pay in debt every year, divided by your total annual income. So that equals your debt to income ratio, or your DTI. So for example, if Jaime pays $150 a month for their student loans and also $300 a month for a car loan, and also in a year, Jaime makes $45,000, their debt to income ratio is 0.12 or 12%. And how that came to be is because $150 a month for the student loans times 12, $300 a month for a car loan times 12. So we add those together and then divided by Jaime's annual income. That's how we get that answer of Jaime's debt to income ratio is 0.12 or 12%. So why does this number matter, right? What is it used for? So lenders, especially mortgage lenders, will use your DTI in addition to other factors, like I mentioned earlier, to consider whether or not you qualify for a loan and how much they would want to lend to you to buy a house. So generally, it's recommended to keep your debt to income ratio below 0.36 or 36%. So if you are thinking about, okay, balancing between saving, maybe for a down payment, paying off debt that you have, maybe you have a lot of student loans and a car note out, and then wanting to buy a house, you could also use this as another data point in just you deciding how do you want to prioritize your money towards saving or towards paying off debt. So say your DTI is kind of above that, you might want to work on, okay, how can you lower your DTI, right? How can you get your debt payments lower or lower your debt so that it is more advantageous for you when you apply for a mortgage loan. But maybe that's not important for you, and that's also okay. So it kind of depends, but this is useful information for you to have so that you can decide what you want to do with your money. So I included these calculators in my first budgeting workshop, but I repeated it here because I think they're still relevant. So here's, this is not the investment workshop. We have other investment workshops, but a common other goal that people have is investing for retirement or whatever it may be. So that calculator there can help you see, okay, if you allocate X amount of money for these years, how much might your investment grow? A lot of people are balancing between paying off student loans and investing. So that's also included here because student loan is a very common debt that a lot of us have. And then this is just bonus. The CFPB have a great like workbook to work on your personal finance, and there's a savings plan worksheet in there that I just wanted to include again. So this one was more of a quickie. Any questions about debt to income ratio?
I don't see any questions right now.
I have a question.
Oh, perfect.
So for the total annual debt, does that includes like rent payments and so forth? Yes.
No, so rent would not be included in that. That's typically not considered debt in the financial world. It's rent. But things like if you're paying off a credit card balance, if you're paying off a car that you borrowed, a personal loan that you took out from a credit union, student loans, medical debt, things that you're paying off would be considered in that category of annual debt payments. So not
Okay,
rent.
thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so you could keep dropping questions in the chat or unmuting if you just thought of one. If not, I'll have a couple other announcements and then we'll really conclude, and for folks that want to stay, we could continue to ask questions. So Sandra Davis is our executive director at Sage Financial Solutions, and quote from Sandra, in life and in financial planning, everything affects everything. So it's kind of like a lot of times when you all talk to like financial coaches or people, a lot of us will answer it depends. And I did that several times this workshop, and it's so true, right? Because everything does affect everything, and we really don't think there's one size fits all usually. So I hope that you're able to puzzle piece together the information you got tonight and then think about what actually applies to you and your specific circumstances. And ultimately, we hope that all of us can just live free and joyfully. I had mentioned earlier that the meditation song that I use, if you all heard it, the lyrics were just a mantra of I'm all I need. And I hope you all remember that for you too, right? Sometimes our journeys with credit and debt will be a journey, and know that you are also all that you need and that we also have each other. So if you wanted to listen to more from Beautiful Cores, that's the group. This is one of their songs, but they have a lot. I linked it on Spotify, or you could look them up on YouTube. And now I learned tonight they might be, that might have been a like a redo of an older song. So that's cool. Here are upcoming workshops. After me, we have Investing Part 1 with Leah, and then Home Buying Basics with Teresa, and then again, Investing but Part 2 with Leah. And here is our contact information at Sage Financial Solutions. All of this will be sent to you. And then I believe Nina also has an announcement about a fun surprise. So I'm going to stop my screen share.
Thank you, Rita. I am going to first share a thank you to you for joining us, for leading us again in a great session. We'll miss you, but I hope our paths cross again. But I do have two announcements, a request to y'all who've attended this session. We all would really appreciate your feedback So please complete the survey. By doing so, you're sort of entered into a raffle to win a gift from our merch shop, our Women's Foundation California merch shop. So I just put the link in the chat to the survey. Please complete it when you get a chance. And like Rita said, our next session is on investments next Tuesday, I believe, February 15th from 5 to 6:30. I dropped the link to our events page, and that'll take you right to the registration to sign up for the investments workshop with Leah Davis. And you can also just keep checking that the events webpage. We'll continue to load some more financial education coaching sessions in March. All right, and just a reminder, you'll get an email from me after today with the PowerPoint and the recording, and then all of our recordings will also be loaded onto our YouTube page. So thank you so much, Rita. Actually, I think I did see a question come in regarding the debt to income ratio. The total amount of your debt doesn't factor in, just how much are you paying out of your income?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Maya. So for the debt to income ratio, it's so what really they're looking at is your debt burden in a year. So how much of your income is going to debt repayment in a year? And they say 36% because that is, I don't know who decided this, but they're like, that's the acceptable amount that people can pay without having a really tough time. So that's why what people are really thinking about when they just look at that quick number of debt to income ratio. So it is just about your annual payments. Now, with that said, a lender may still ask you for the total amount of debt that you may owe. And each lender will have their different ways that they consider worthiness. But that DTI is a very common one data point that they'll use to evaluate whether or not you qualify for a loan at that lender and how much they may lend to you. Yes, I believe that was the only question I saw in the chat. Yeah, I'm so glad to see all the love in the chat. Definitely, I think this information needs to be shared more. And even if it's your first time, that's awesome that you're taking time to learn it. Yeah, please fill out the evals and hopefully good luck to you all that you'll win the raffle. We really appreciate all of your feedback. It helps us keep doing what we're doing and keep improving.
Exactly. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight, and so much appreciation and gratitude to you, Rita. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks again. Hopefully we'll partner again in different ways, or I'll see you all in other spaces. Yay for our collective power.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had a quick question about your organization, Sage. Do you guys provide free coaching, or is it at cost, or how does it work?
That's a great question. What would Sandra say? So we definitely have a team of coaches. Generally for our coaching, we partner with different orgs, and sometimes that's provided for free for folks, but I'm not sure what exactly we're doing in terms of direct coaching. So I would say, let me drop Kieran, who is our person that knows all the things. Let me drop Kieran's email into the chat, and you can email Kieran at Sage and you can ask him this question. He'll be able to let you know. Also, I would recommend following us on Instagram. Sandra does all these posts all the time, and it's like, she does live Q&As too, so she's great. Yeah, so that's our website. And then I would say email Kieran, who's kind of like our office manager, and then he should be able to give you more information about if you wanted to work with a financial coach, could we match you up with a pro bono coach, or what we're doing right now at Sage.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye all.